there are going to be some changes coming to college football, specifically to NIL. And I was in this conversation earlier today with a guy that we used to all know around here because he hired most of us, and a guy who's now over at On3, Shannon Terry. And we were talking back and forth about some changes that are coming in NIL. Kind of stemmed from a clip, ironically, that we talked about the other day over on Brandon Walker's show. And it really has to do with how things aren't so lovely right now for a lot of you, and how I think things are radically about to change. So Shannon was replying to me earlier today, and he was talking about how the athlete IP plus the school mark IP, I'm going to explain all this in a second, equals the real opportunity. We've talked about that ad nauseum on the show for a little while, how things are going to be more directed into a flow down that river instead of the just collective wild, wild west river that we see right now. And he said, we're going to look back 10 years from now and say, wow, can you believe the schools are now making this much off of NIL? Okay, so my reply is the crux of what I want to get to tonight. Schools making bank off NIL is not a concept today. None of you talk about that because it doesn't exist. Arkansas or Illinois or Rutgers, they're not making money off NIL right now. I'm about to tell you they're going to make a ton of money off of it. Now, that may sound good or bad to you. Well, it all depends on what your viewpoint is. So right now, what don't you like? A lot of you have complained. I saw David Hale over at ESPN. Was a really good reporter that covers our sport. He was repeating some numbers that had been sent to him, I think by a focus group earlier today, or a research group, that was just gauging the public's perspective on NIL. And there was, as you would expect, a really big split of people who thought it was a net positive for college football and a net negative for college football. And they had it all divided up. They had it divided up from political classes to old and young to racial. They had everything broken down. I'm not going to dive that deep. I'm just saying, some of you love where we are, some of you don't like where we are, but the ones who don't like where we are, I would ask this. What if things change to where things are a lot more regimented, they're more formatted, it's nice and neat and tidy, and you don't have a whole lot of what just happened with Jaden Rashada going on. Because I really don't think hardly anyone looked at that situation the way it played out and said, yeah, that seems great for the game overall. So, some things are unpredictable in this sport. This is not. Some things are really unpredictable in college football. The direction NIL is about to go is not. And the reason is because if you're out to sea and you got 7 captains on 7 ships and they all want to go to the same harbor, those ships are going to wind up in that harbor. And if you tell the powers that be in this sport, I'm not even knocking them, I'm just matter-of-factly telling you, if you tell the powers that be, hey, there's this place you can direct this sport, and there's this place you can push NIL to where you guys make a lot of money. Well, guess where they're going to go? Doesn't take a rocket scientist. Even we figure that out, right? How do we get there? What does that even mean, by the way? Well, you saw what Shannon said there, and what I'll reiterate. The real value in NIL hasn't been realized yet, in my opinion. Right now, you've still got folks who are so in the weeds on this thing that they think about NIL in terms of collective, in terms of whether it's legal or not. How much can we offer a kid as a recruiting inducement? Which is not the way it's supposed to operate, but it operates that way most of the time. And so it's how much could I get guaranteed to go to that school through their collective? And I am a believer that's not where we're going to be very much longer. And I'm also a believer, as a result of that, a lot of you are going to find college football a lot more palatable. You're going to be able to accept it. It's going to go down a little bit easier than it goes down right now, where some of you are having to hold your nose, or maybe you just don't follow recruiting anymore, or maybe you just have to fingers in the ear, la, 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 can't hear you when people report about NIL and you just want to know who's on your team come week 1 in the fall. You don't have to live like that. And I don't think you're going to have to live like that much longer. But this whole concept of IP, which stands for intellectual property, by the way, the IP in my world, in the media world, is the content that we produce, my ideas, my thoughts. This show right here, well, the ownership of this show is kind of interesting. But in general terms, if you're doing a show and you are employed by 24/7 Sports and CBS, they own that content. That G on the side of Brock Bowers' helmet in the B-roll you're watching right now, that is Georgia intellectual property. Brock Bowers puts that helmet on, and all of a sudden Brock Bowers and the things that he does and the words that he utters and what he posts on social media, it's all of a sudden worth a whole lot more. because of the rub that Brock Bowers, talented in his own right, gets from that G. Jackson Smith and Jigba, really good player. If he's standing on a street corner, it's one thing. If he's playing for Ohio State University, that's another thing. So there's value in both sides. And down the road, through things like group licensing, this is going to be realized. It has long since been realized on the professional side of things. They've had their act together. That is an entity, whether it be the NFL or Major League Baseball or NBA. I mean, this is what they do. This is not what college athletics has done. So it's a new realm for everyone. But what does it mean for you? Forget nameless, faceless bureaucrats. Forget even the football players for a second. This is a show for fans. You are the ones who drive the bus. All this ultimately exists because of you, if you really stop to think about that for a second. There's a whole lot of money to be made because of you. Not just because of how talented a player is, not just because of how much brand value is in a university logo. Yes, those things are true, but that's the cart before the horse. You're the one who's really powering all that. And so I think it bears mentioning how this affects you. People who are saying it's none of your business, or it doesn't matter what you think, it very much matters what you think. Because if you don't like the product, you can leave, and the product loses its value. And I hope more people in this industry realize that than I feel they do. Down the road, what if, for example, and this may be where Shannon and I disagree a little bit. I think that he's right. I think it will be more broad. He, for example, is a believer that group licensing sphere, if you will, that group licensing model essentially looks like this. Pate State is a Learfield IMG partner. They distribute all of our games and radio and whatnot. You've heard of Learfield IMG for a long time, but the Learfield IMGs of the world, they are the affiliate partner, the broadcast partner, etc., the licensing partner of Pate State. All of a sudden, they get in the NIL game. Okay, so Pate State recruits a 5-star quarterback. Well, Learfield IMG comes to Pate State, and just because we're clients with them, we get cuts from Ford or from Chevy or from Toyota or from Aflac or from State Farm. And these are not companies that are going to do one-on-one business with a local high school kid. These are not companies, all due respect, that are going to be trafficking with your collective. They're too big for that. But they're not too big for the Learfield IMGs of the world. And they're not too big for Pate State or Alabama or USC and the like. And all of a sudden, that 5-star quarterback lives in a world a few years down the road where he knows what his value would be, what his earnings would be at my program because of that partnership before he ever puts pen to paper. A receiver of 4 or 5-star notoriety knows that while his position value may be a little less than quarterback, it's still way up there. Now, Shannon mentioned this earlier today and said, I think the top players are going to have access to that group licensing world, but I think by and large, the more rank and file players are going to live in the collective world. So the collective world's not going anywhere, and I'm a believer the collective world's not going anywhere. I think it'll fade a little bit more into the background, and that group licensing model will creep a little bit more into the forefront as the years go on. Because I think everyone will like it. Players will like it. The families of players will like it because you absolutely understand your value. It doesn't limit you, by the way, from getting additional NIL deals if you can secure them by yourself. It doesn't limit you from getting collective money. It doesn't limit any of that. What it does is it basically gives you what you would call a downside guarantee of knowing how much money you're going to make, pending you stay in school and you keep your grades up and you stay out of trouble. So you have benchmarks you have to hit. But it's so much neater and cleaner and organized that way. And here's the other side of that. The schools make a ton of money off of it. Because if it's their IP that's all ultimately offering the value, if Pate State, for example, if that logo exists before you ever come to play for me, and that logo is going to have value whether you come play for me or not, then you better believe whatever cut of that group licensing is coming through here, it's going to be in my pocket before it's in your pocket. Now, again, as I said 10 minutes ago, you can decide whether you like that or not. You may have differing opinion from me. I happen to like the model I just mentioned a little bit more than what we have currently. But if you like more Wild West approaches to things and you kind of get into those Jaden Rashada fiascos where no one really knows who can afford to pay what and can your collective fit the bill and do you owe someone else money? Does it get litigious? Did anyone read the fine print in the paperwork? The answers were no, because none of these places are set up to do this stuff. And likewise, on the other side of the coin, the folks I'm talking about very much are. They didn't wake up this morning and think that they need to get in this game. There's been a lot of legwork put in this already. And so I think the terms brand value versus roster value, which we've talked about on the show before, I think you're going to see it injected into the mainstream vernacular of the college football space. I think 5 years from now, every one of you will understand the difference between brand value and roster value. Roster value meaning if I'm a corner and I play for Pate State, what am I worth to that team? No different than an NFL salary number, in other words. But brand value, what does Golden Flake think I'm worth? What kind of partnership could I secure with Exxon? I don't know, is Exxon in the NIL game? Point being, there is a difference there. Those are two completely different buckets. And I think that's where we're headed, and I do think that it will be a lot more accepted by a lot more people than the structure we have currently.
Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure to leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.